Good evening, everybody, and welcome to episode 44 of Radio Europa. Tonight I'm joined by Laura and Darth from England and Scotland, respectively. Hi, guys.
Hey, guys.
So we've got a couple of things we're going to talk about today. As you can see in the title, France does not belong to the French, apparently, and the Milkshake Assaults. Before that, we've got a few smaller topics that we're going to discuss. But before all of that, I just want to mention thank you to Yarmunda, who last week donated €10, and it was towards the end of the chat, and we didn't get a chance to read it out, so we're just reading that out now for you. And as usual, thanks to anybody who does donate; it's well appreciated. So, yeah, before we start on the main topics, we've got a couple of things we want to discuss. Firstly, an article that we actually published on our website earlier about a rapper in France, Cameroonian rapper born in France, who, he has some choice things to say about France and the French people, and he's previously been in trouble for racial hatred, basically. I don't know what you guys think about this one, but it looks pretty clown world to me.
Yep. His name is Nick Conrad. He's Cameroonian born in France, who was previously fined for advocating for the killings of white babies in his lyrics, is in trouble again for his hateful rhetoric against the native French. So in his video, he seemed to be strangling a white woman, which is representing France. And the lyrics of choice, the song starts with great admiration and love for France, as he begins with, quote, "Cock in France's mouth. This country has never been sweet," whilst victimising himself about how the media accuses him of stirring up civil war. And then his chorus is the, quote, "cherry on the cake, I fuck France, I burn France until she retches in agony." So clearly the guy is enjoying living in the country, which has clearly been so good to him.
Yeah, I mean, that's gratitude right there, isn't it? Yeah, he sounds like not a nice fellow at all, but of course, he'll probably get another slap on the wrist, and that'll be that, and he'll go back to making music about raping French women or whatever. I think we've just got the song on the video at the moment. Yeah, so as you can see, the lyrics are not very pleasant. Neither is the video, I think, in parts. Yeah, there we go.
Wasn't there another one recently where, was it an Asian man who was singing about grooming white girls? Did you guys see that one?
Yeah, that was. I think it was on BBC's like Asian network or something, wasn't it? And they put this song out, which was some. I don't know the exact detail of it, but I remember seeing it.
And wasn't there an African guy who hanged a little white kid in a video as well?
Yeah, I think that was in America. I might be wrong though.
Yeah, I didn't see that one, but yeah.
I mean, the thing is that they're clearly doing it because they know it will get attention. Any kind of publicity is good publicity in their eyes, but it's just kind of reinforcing the narrative that there is this hate for the countries which they are living in. And obviously there's a clear agenda that they hope to eventually control how the Western countries exist.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty hard stuff, isn't it? And I think it does just go to demonstrate further a double standard. I mean, we don't really need to reiterate it. I think everybody listening will know. But if you put these lyrics the other way around in the mouth of a white Frenchman, then he would clearly be in a lot more trouble. So moving on to a slightly different story, a lot of you will know that over in Australia they've recently had a general election. And the Conservative coalition kind of won, but some people think that's good, some people think it's bad. But I think Laura had a few things to say about Fraser Anning in particular, who we've spoken about on this web channel a bit before.
Yeah. Yeah, so they've kind of moved to the right a little bit in Australia, I believe, because it's like the Liberals. Obviously, our Liberals in Britain are the Liberal Democrats, but the Liberals in Australia are further to the right. So I'm being told from my Australian contacts that they have moved a little bit further to the right, but it's nowhere near where we want it to be. Fraser Anning, unfortunately, didn't keep his seat. He lost it. And I think, don't quote me on this, but just from what people are telling me on Twitter, he actually got more votes this time than he did last time. But unfortunately, he's not kept his seat. So I've been stalking his Twitter for the last few days, trying to get a response from him because he's gone a bit quiet. And he's posted on Facebook, "I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to every supporter, volunteer and candidate who has supported me over the last 2 years." And he's basically said that he's disappointed at the results, but we had hundreds of candidates put their hands up, hardworking everyday Aussies want a change. We went from 0 to 2,000 members in less than 2 days. We will be back. And then he said, "The party and I will use this time to prepare for the next election. We will have a team in every state and a candidate in every seat. Thank you all." So it's good that he's carrying on. We'll continue to support him at Defend Europa. And there's a video about him as well on my personal channel if anyone wants to see what he stands for. But yeah, it's disappointing that he didn't get re-elected, but he'll still be a public voice for us and he'll still be able to, help us shift the Overton window, just not as effectively as before, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a shame he didn't keep his seat, but I guess I can imagine that I don't quite know how the constituency thing works in Australia, but I can imagine that there was quite a concerted effort by leftists and agitators to get him out. So there's probably a lot of tactical voting going on in his neck of the woods,
Yeah, they've also been saying on his post as well, I think we've got it up on the screen. So apparently somebody was caught on camera, somebody who counts the votes, saying that they were told to say that 9 out of every 10 votes for him weren't accepted or something. So I've not looked into it yet, so nobody quote me on this. But apparently Fraser Anning is saying that this person's been recorded and we've got evidence of them on camera saying that they were told to spoil Fraser Anning ballot papers, ones that put him at number 1. So I don't know how authentic that suggestion is, but we'll have a look into it. I mean, he is. We all suspected before the election that they'd try and stop him, so it wouldn't surprise me if they did do that. But yeah, we don't have any evidence at the minute. It's just hearsay.
One thing I was going to say, and this is kind of more of an overall arc of the Australian election. I'd kind of looked at it the other day, and this is another example of, I think most of the polls that were done for Australia for the election, all of them were wrong in the sense that they all expected the Labour Party to secure victory for Parliament. And again, they were wrong. And this is showing an increasing number. You've now got the US election, you've got Brexit, you've got this, you've got a couple of other elections where you're getting the polls to be wrong again and again and again, and it's, right-leaning parties are winning the elections against all odds.
Yeah, I kind of get the impression that with these polls that, the companies that conduct them, one would imagine they have a liberal bias, and they also have contacts with sort of a deep establishment. So without wanting to be too conspiratorial about it, I could imagine that it may have crossed their minds to inflate the vote of the party they want to win as a way of subtly altering public perception and therefore, which way the public votes. Because I think especially middle of the road voters sometimes would want to go with the winning team, as it were. So could be an angle there.
Yeah, I think there's going to be some kind of bias. And I, for one, have never been, polled or phoned to give a poll, so I have no idea how they go about picking who it is that they're going to poll. But I remember reading an article the other day. I can't remember what website it was, but the guy who was writing it was basically admitting the fact that there must be some kind of inbuilt bias into the way that the polls are carried out. Elsewise, there wouldn't be the same mistakes being made again and again and again.
Yeah, I think that there is probably something going on there. It looks like in this country, at least, in the UK, the polls they seem to have overcompensated for the bias, because at the moment, the Brexit Party is doing really well in all the polls, and that's not something that we would have expected to see. Even if it was true, we would have expected to see their vote deflated. But it does look like they're doing okay at the moment.
Time will tell.
Indeed. I think the last thing we were going to speak about, the last kind of mini topic, was something that's going on in Sweden at the moment, which is kind of it's almost funny, but it's also a bit sinister that the government, I'll just double check I'm getting this right. The Minister of Justice, Morgan Johansson, is behind an initiative to try and ban the entirety of the runic alphabet, the Oude Futhark, or by just the Futhark by its other names, which was the pre-Latin Germanic script. I mean, of course, the background to it, as if we need to really tell you, but the background is, oh well, the runes are used by neo-Nazis, so we should ban them, which is kind of not been met with great positivity by some of the Asatru sphere. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that. I mean, it's just a bit crazy to me.
It's just continuing what they have been doing, because as we know, a lot of the old European runes are in the ADL hate symbol database. And at Defend Europa, our original logo, I don't know if anyone who's listening has been with us for over 6 months, but we had a life rune and it got banned from Twitter because it's in the ADL hate symbol database. So they just go after European historical symbols. They never do it to like Jewish symbols or Muslim symbols or anything, just because certain groups use these symbols as symbols for their parties or their movements or whatever as well. I mean, whether you agree with them or not, it doesn't take it that away from the fact that it's European history, and they're just trying to ban it, and it's just disgusting. I don't know what else you can say about it, to be honest. It's just been continuing for quite a while now, hasn't it? It's been a good few years that we've been reporting on them doing this.
Well, this isn't just obviously, to do with runes and letterings of alphabets. This is now kind of running into signs, so the whole OK symbol fiasco that's going on right now. And what I find hilarious about that is that the media and the establishment are allowing small groups of people to control what is and what isn't considered to be a hate symbol. Instead of just ignoring that fact, they're allowing people to dictate what is and what isn't going to be considered to be hateful, and then they try and solve this by going about and banning things, which we all know just doesn't work.
Well, no, and you end up with a situation where actually more things are banned than are permitted. And somebody in the chat has just mentioned the Confederate monuments in the US, and it does seem that there is a wave of iconoclasm sweeping the Western world, and any country which has a population of predominantly European descent, whether it's native in Europe or in the Americas or in Oceania, it does seem that there is this kind of organized effort to remove the symbolisms that we associate with our history. And of course, I mean, if you want to kind of take a conspiratorial view of that, I can think of things that George Orwell said, which are quite prescient about you destroy a people by destroying the roots and the history. And it does feel like whether this is there is a conspiratorial intent or not, this will be the end result, because you destroy the heritage of the European people. You really do sever any non-materialistic ties that they have to their identity, which is a tragedy, but it's what is going on, I think.
The non-conspiracist in me, I think that a lot of this kind of movement to remove historical symbols and statues, it is coming from a point or a mindset of, if we remove these things, we will no longer, or we will reduce the risk of racism and hate being in our society. But that's not how this works. The phrase, those who do not know history are doomed to repeat it, or something to that effect. And I just don't think that removing stuff because it scares you or because it's linked to hateful things is going to fix anything.
No, and it's kind of like, rather than orthodox economic Marxism, they're just transplanting Marxist arguments into a kind of racial Marxism, where they're saying, oh, okay, well, if we just do X, Y, and Z, then we'll equalize the races. But you're right. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. And they're going to, the unintended consequence, if it isn't a conspiracy, the unintended consequence, of course, is that severing of roots and the further kind of commoditization of Europeans, which is tragic, of course, it really is. But there we go. That's where we are at the moment. So it's
And just to quote somebody in the chat, Blackwater Park, that's the line sold to the NPCs. The people behind know what they're doing, and there's probably an element of truth to that.
Yeah, I mean, I personally do believe that. I do believe that because they're well aware, they're intelligent people, and they're well aware of the power of symbolism and the power of identity in history. So I think after those unfortunate black pills, I think we've only got more black pills for you, I'm afraid, but we'll move on to the first of our main stories, which is France does not belong to the French. Now, that is a quote from a gang of, I presume, illegal immigrants who basically kind of staged a rather loud sit-in in Paris's Charles de Gaulle airport. It's basically a large number of sub-Saharan Africans demanding, protesting against France's asylum policy and demanding regularization. They want legal papers to remain in the country. They call themselves the Black Vests. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot we could say about this. Don't know if you guys want to add anything on this one.
I can go through the article if you like. We've got
yeah, please,
an article, and I think our IT guy is going to play the video now, so it's on the screen. So basically, hundreds of black vest migrant protesters occupied Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris on Sunday, demanding to speak to Prime Minister Edouard Philippe in a demonstration against deportations and in favour of legal papers for all. So there was around 500 people, and they gathered in Terminal 2 of the airport. Riot police officers stood next to them and monitored their activity. But they basically shouted out, France does not belong to the French. Everyone has a right to be here. That's kind of it, really. They're just, I don't know about you guys, but I am getting sick of the audacity of the foreigners that come over to our country and think that they can tell us that it's their country as much as theirs, as ours, sorry. Do you know, I've actually been told on Twitter today by Africans that if I'm not happy with their behaviour, then I can leave the country. And Ash Saka, I don't know if you know her, she's a communist, Muslim, Bengali, Tottenham fan. She's been tweeting that if people are unhappy with the behaviour of foreigners in London, and if we're happy with our demographic replacement, then we should go move to another country. I mean, the actual cheek, how dare these people come over here and tell us that if we're not happy, we can move to a different country. And the thing that gets me is these people, on one hand, they complain about racism and say that they're oppressed. And then on the other hand, they're given this mainstream media platform to criticise all white people and tell us to leave our own country. And if I told them to leave our country, I'd get done for racism, but they're allowed to do it. And this is just another example in France. So this time it's a group of 500 people in France are saying that France belongs to everyone. We get it all the time in Britain, people telling us that they're as British as us, that we shouldn't have any borders and people should be able to go where they want. And because of colonialism, which of course was all bad, they didn't get anything from that sarcasm, by the way, we deserve it. And I'm just getting really sick of it. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, I mean, what I found was interesting in the article, well, not interesting, but kind of just, it stood out to me, was their line that France, they said, everybody has a right to be here. And it's kind of like, well, that doesn't make any sense, because quite clearly not everybody in the world cannot go and move to France. It's logistically and just practically impossible. We're talking scale. So I don't quite understand how, I mean, do they not kind of, when they say it, do they not think, well, hang on a minute, maybe that's not really plausible. It just doesn't make sense to me. But
well, they're used to people bending over backwards for them and accommodating every single need that they have. I mean, we have completely protected groups in Britain. Muslims are one of them. Jewish people are one of them as well. They can say whatever they want about everybody else, but they're completely protected and we can't critique them at all. And they know that as well, so they're so comfortable, and they can say all this horrible stuff about us and say that we need to leave our own country, our nation that we built, our ancestors built, and they can just get away with it because they're so confident because of the diversity quotas and the affirmative action and all this stuff that builds them up and lets them say whatever they want. And our traitorous governments that treat them like victims and treat us like bad people, they buy it all. Like David Lammy, for example, thinks that his dad came over here to help rebuild our country following on from the end of World War II. And it's absolute crap, but he genuinely believes that because he's been told it by the media and by politicians. So they're just sat on these high horses because they've had their every need pandered to for the last, well, since Windrush in 1948. So they're just getting really cocky. But I've seen it increasing a lot over the last 6 months. I think they're getting really, really cocky recently.
And it's not being helped by the mainstream media. You know, there was that article that the BBC of all places released the other day, "Are weddings too white?" You know, so the media is releasing articles again continuously whereby it is bringing into question whether the white people of the Western countries are allowed to exist, is the underlying message I would say is being put forward.
Yeah, that's kind of true. I mean, there is an implication there that, you know, they're saying, well, we have these rights, we have those rights, this is our country. It's like, well, what about us? You know, we were kind of here first, guys. So what about us? And I think one of the biggest problems along with this, and somebody in the chat alluded to this as well, is that it's not just migrants, and in this case, illegal migrants, who, by the way, have broken French law already. So why they have a right to complain, I don't know. But the problem that is happening is that the voices of attack are being amplified by advocacy groups. I mean, just looking at the article in RT and in Le Parisien as well, it says that they're basically organized by a migrant advocacy group called Collectif La Chapelle des Bœufs. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, but somebody correct me if I'm wrong. But I mean, you can kind of picture what this group is. It's probably white French people, white French leftists. It's a militant group, so that, you know, they use the fist symbol. They're probably far leftists, all white. They've probably got some dubious links to people who like to fund these kind of movements. And thanks to those groups, these irrational voices of saying, well, we've committed a crime, but it doesn't matter because France belongs to us, is suddenly being amplified to mainstream status because of these advocacy groups.
And also they have no respect because they didn't build this nation up from nothing. They've just come here and been given everything on a silver platter. So they don't know what hardship is. And they just come over here and take. And they don't care if they mess the country up because what do they care? They've only been here for one generation. Whereas it actually means something to us and the history means something to us. So we want to nurture the country and protect it and keep everybody safe. They're just happy to come over here and wreck it, because if they do wreck it, they've got somewhere else to go, haven't they? Whereas we haven't.
To play devil's advocate on that point, I think that maybe not most of, but a lot of the younger generations in this country who have been born here do not know hardship either. And I'll place myself, and probably you guys would place yourself in that group as well, where we don't really know true hardship compared to 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago, whereby we had to fight for our existence. So I think people are more willing to sit back and allow these things to happen because they don't actually know what they fought for, and they're so comfortable in their lifestyle that as long as they have their iPads and their technology and social media, why should they care about what else is happening around them?
Well, it's interesting actually because last week when we had Dr. Edward Dutton on, and I recommend everybody go and listen to last week's podcast because this guy was incredible. But he kind of alluded to this, that which is one of the problems with us in the UK particularly, but everywhere in the West, is that our generation, the generations of the post-war period, have never experienced true Darwinian conditions. We've never had to struggle and fight, and that has engendered weakness as almost like an evolutionary problem. Therefore, like you say, we are more willing to sit back and say, oh, well, yeah, give them some money, give them this, and we'll, share everything around. And it is an almost like a maladaptive trait, to use Dr. Dutton's terminology. It is so, the fact that we haven't experienced these hardships is probably what's informing a lot of the liberal responses to these incidents.
And I think somebody's saying in the chat, some of us are fighting for the existence of the Western civilization, and that is true. But I think there is a definite minority of people either who are vocal or who are actively trying to keep our heritage, because if there was more, I reckon you would have less kind of an open movement to try and remove so much of the UK, Europe, America's history at the cries of the social justice warriors.
Yeah, I mean that's probably true, and yeah. Well, I don't really know what more to add to that. I think you're spot on. Laura, have you got any further thoughts on this at this point?
No, I've just been on a bit of a rant this evening, haven't I? Everyone's just annoying me because I'm just sick of the audacity of these people. But not actually, the group that annoys me the most is the white people, the European people that let them get away with this, and they're just becoming increasingly difficult to deal with. I'm trying to bite my tongue so much, but it really is difficult sometimes.
Yeah, it is incredible when you see white Europeans in this country and in other countries of Europe. They are so willing to give away. I don't think they appreciate the gravity of events, but they're so willing to give away anything and everything, and it almost like they feel obligated to do so. I'm struggling. I have been thinking a lot about this today, actually, the psychology of these people, and I'm struggling to appreciate the psychology behind. Yes, here you go. Have our country. It doesn't make any sense to me, but it would be interesting to conduct a proper, scientific study on these people. Not that we would ever be allowed to, but would be interesting to.
Yeah, one other thing as well is that I was thinking about what was it called when it was compulsory military service?
Conscription.
Or the draft, if you want.
Yeah, is it public service or something? I was thinking that that it'd be good to bring that back because I just think that there are so many just weak, just petty people that have spent their whole lives wrapped in cotton wool. And I think they need a little bit of a shock. And I think public service, people having to do a year's service would be a good thing. What do you two think about that?
I agree with that.
National service. Sorry.
Possibly more from the fact that I suppose it's kind of the same thing as what you're saying, but there's so much of the upcoming generation, the youngest generations, they have no sense of responsibility whatsoever. And any kind of authority tells them off for doing something, they just throw it back in their face. There's no respect anymore. And I think that, a military service would, work to bring that back at least somehow.
I second that. I mean, I'm a big advocate of national service, and I think, it probably would have done me some good personally, but and I think it would do, especially young men, a lot of good, because it reminds me of that quote about the weak demand rights and the strong confer responsibilities and duties upon themselves. And I think when you go through that period of regimented existence where you learn the proper European values of honour and respect and duty and things like that, you go from being a weak rights demander to a strong acceptor of duty. And I think that, that is a very important transformation that a lot of young men in our countries could do with right now.
And it's also, if you have pride, then you're much more likely to want to hold on to what has given you that pride. And obviously the military ideas that we have obviously stem back to when the UK was a much more respected place. And if you're taught the pride of our country, you're much more likely to want to fight to keep that in existence.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. Absolutely. I do think it's a policy that should be advocated at a national level. Right, so I think we're probably gonna move on to the next topic now. Before we do, I just want to say thank you to everybody that's donated recently. It's we greatly appreciate it, and it helps us to improve what we do and bring more content, original content to you all. If anybody does want to help us out, send us some donations or whatever, there's links in the description below to do so. And of course, everybody please remember to like and subscribe. It helps it boosts our interactions, and it's good for us. So, right, I think we're going to get on to the next topic now, which has kind of been big news, particularly in the Anglosphere, and it's kind of filtered through to Europe as well, which is the milkshake saga, the trend that's cottoned on of basically liberals throwing milkshakes at who they perceive to be fascists. I mean, it's basically like milquetoast, kosher nationalists, like Tommy Robinson types, who are, even classical liberals are getting the brunt of this. So yeah, I think we're gonna have a look at this. And Darth, I don't know if you want to say a few things about this. We've got the article up on screen at the moment.
Sure. So this has all stemmed, I think, the kind of the movement has stemmed from initially Tommy Robinson being milkshaked by a guy who he was, I think, trying to question about his actions. The media spun it in a way that Tommy Robinson was being aggressive towards this guy because he was Asian. But I think there was more to the story. So this guy got really mad at him and threw a milkshake on him. And this has now kind of started a trend of, as you said, basically people who are not on the left are being covered in milkshake from time to time. So, Carl Benjamin has been milkshaked, I think, twice, and 4 attempts on him. Tommy Robinson has been done several times. Interestingly, just before I mention about Farage, there was a tweet put out on the 18th of May, so a couple of days ago, by Burger King. And this tweet said, "Dear people of Scotland, we are selling milkshakes all weekend. Have fun. Love BK. #just saying." Now, for the context, this was because I believe Farage was travelling up to Scotland, obviously, to push his Brexit party. And the police in Scotland, obviously aware of what was going on, had approached McDonald's and said, do us a favour, don't sell milkshakes if you can in the area that Farage is going to be in, because it's going to cause issues. So obviously Burger King knew about this, and there's obviously that friendly rivalry between the two joints. So they turned around and said, well, we're selling milkshakes all weekend, have fun. But everybody immediately, when saw this, saw the opposite side of it, of everybody is using milkshakes now to attack politicians, and it seems that Burger King are endorsing political violence, because this is what it is. People are saying throwing a milkshake in somebody, there's nothing wrong with it. There's a Guardian article, I think, where a guy talks about it being hilarious. But throwing something like this at somebody is assault, whether you agree with it or not. I mean, there's already been a couple of people arrested for it. So that happened the other day, and then obviously Farage was attacked by a male, Paul Crowther, in Newcastle. He had bought himself, I think it was a Five Guys milkshake that cost stupid amounts of money, and he had been saw that there was a Brexit party, and it turned out Farage was nearby, and he went up and threw it all over him. And he tweeted the fact that he was going to do this, or that there was party members there. He was thinking about it, and then he tweeted the fact that he'd done it. So he'd done himself out the park before he'd even been arrested. But it's a pretty sad state of affairs. A, that people feel the need to do this, and B, are trying to argue that it's okay. So that's kind of what I have to say on it.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that bother me about this as well, is that on the one hand, I mean, objectively, we can say, well, it's only a milkshake, but the first thing that bothers me about this is that the liberal left side of the media, particularly the Independent, Metro, the Guardian types, are kind of bigging this up as if it's funny, and they're saying they're actually, I mean, there was one headline, throwing a milkshake at Farage is absolutely hilarious, and it's like, how do these people, first of all, how can they get away with this? Because if a right-wing paper calls an MP a traitor, and they basically get lambasted for it for months, but these papers are literally advocating assault on politicians they disagree with, and no one's going to do anything about it, of course. But the other thing that really bothers me about this is that it seems that it kind of bothers me that the way liberals go about this, they can't even assault a political opponent without an effeminate giggle. You know, the whole, oh, I'm throwing a milkshake. It's the most soy boy effect kind of political protest, and it's just so ridiculous. I mean, I don't know what more to say. It gets me quite cross, really, but it is so ridiculous.
I think there's a couple of things which I find really interesting. One is the left has somehow successfully managed to make the argument that words are violence, and that violence is okay. That's first of all. Second, Jeremy Corbyn was egged recently, and the person who did this was arrested and was apparently put in jail for several days. Now, the guy who attacked Farage obviously was arrested. I have a funny feeling that the only reason he was arrested was because he is an accepted member of the political establishment. He's not running for office of like Tommy Robinson or Carl Benjamin. And the other thing I would think is, you know, the Burger King tweet, had that been, for example, the NRA, you know, the National Rifle Association in America, had made some kind of comment, and then something happened a day or two later, I can guarantee you there would be wall-to-wall coverage about how the NRA had endorsed right-wing violence, possible right-wing gun violence, if something like that were to happen. Whereas here, it's most people are saying, oh, it's just a joke, you know, take a joke, blah, 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 blah. It's taken in good stead. But I guarantee you, had it been a left-wing person who was the victim, there would be uproar. And as up on the screen right now, it's not the same as a prelude to people throwing acid or bricks at somebody. Now, ironically enough, there was a guy, an owner of a craft brewery, had put out that the company Twitter page had put out that people should start throwing bricks at people, not just milkshakes. Which that is the logical next step. You know, move to something more dangerous as a projectile to be thrown.
Yeah, and I mean, I saw the tweet by that brewery, and I thought, I mean, it's absolutely outrageous, because it's like with that French rapper. If you change the author of the speech and you swap the left-wing, the right-wing politicians for the left or the centre, or journalists, for instance. I mean, could you imagine, hypothetically, this is just a hypothetical scenario, you know, I'm not advocating this or anything, but could you imagine if people on the right, or companies in cahoots with people on the right, were advocating throwing bricks at journalists, like Day of the Brick that went around on Twitter? I mean, they would go crazy. There would be parliamentary investigations, there'd be arrests, there'd be terrorism trials, you know, it would be like full Turner Diaries. But that double standard is quite evident, that you know, it's because they're right wing. But this is the real point that I wanted to get onto, was that it seemed, and I think I said this in the chat before we started, but it seems that when a politician or a political activist like Tommy Robinson or Carl Benjamin, I don't know why they think this of Carl, but anyway, when a politician outside of the mainstream, outside of the accepted opinions of liberal democracy exists, the proponents of liberal democracy decide, okay, well, because this person advocates values contrary to the mainstream rules, i.e. the rules of respecting the rights of somebody to go about their business unmolested and to speak freely, don't apply. It's like, well, their logic is, well, they're fascists, so the protection, the civil liberties don't apply to them. And the worrying part about that is that it seems that logic, which is an inherently kind of Marxist approach, the cultural Marxist approach, has been adopted by every level, every institution, and every level of authority, from the government to the courts, the police. And it's very reminiscent of the long march through the institutions, because these institutions are primarily now occupied by people with the same political views as the milkshake chucking soy boy the other day. And that, I think, is the fundamental problem we have here.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you almost 90%. And the only thing I would say is I think there's also somewhat of a class issue there. The fact that you can have, obviously, people like Jacob Rees-Mogg and Farage are being called Nazis. I think David Lammy said that Jacob Rees-Mogg was as bad as, or was super Hitler or something like that, totally blown out of proportion in all manner. But I think because they are of a certain class, there is a grudging acceptance that these people are allowed to exist. But with the likes of Tommy Robinson, of Carl Benjamin, of anybody who's out with the political elite, who is, of that high-ranking university level, they're accepted. But anybody else who tries to challenge and tries to kind of get their foot into the door, they are outright demonized to the nth degree.
Yeah, I think there is something in that. And I think as well, with people like Tommy Robinson, it's because the media have popularized this conception of Tommy as a street fighting thug. They always refer to him as a thug or a street activist, which kind of it kind of delegitimizes their existence, basically, and means that any action against them is entirely permissible, which of course is silly. But the thing that, there's two things that I wanted to refer to is the case. Everyone will know about this, but the case of Pim Fortuyn, I can't pronounce his name, the Dutch guy who was shot a decade or so ago. The first attack on him was a cake, so it can escalate quite easily, especially when the media are whipping up a frenzy against people and calling them Nazis and fascists, which to the minds of some radical leftists will justify fatal violence towards them, which is concerning. But the thing I wanted to, and I was going to bring Laura in on this actually, the thing I wanted to look at as well is the ideological approach. So it is impossible to state objectively that Carl Benjamin is anything other than a classic liberal. He's very milquetoast, and most people on our side of the aisle actually don't like him because he's basically a liberal, and he doesn't care about the race issues or even the religious issues to the extent that we do. So it kind of, I don't know what you think about this, Laura, but it kind of baffles me that the left think that Carl Benjamin is actually a threat to liberal hegemony, because he is a liberal, isn't he?
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? I'm trying to kind of step back a few years back to before I got into kind of like race and ethnicity and stuff, and I was more just my values and stuff. And would I have found something like that as being quite far right? And I don't think I ever would have. So it's weird that they are so threatened by his views. If they just listened to one of his videos, they would see that he was a total normie. It's really weird. I'm not sure. It's difficult to try and perceive how other people see things. I remember seeing some pro-white posts on Twitter a few years ago, and it was the first ones that I'd seen, and I was very shocked. And I was thinking, you're not allowed to post that. But of course, now if I see that, I'm like, yeah, that's fine. So I guess people are at different stages, and they perceive things as being a lot worse than they are, or a lot better than they are. One thing that I just wanted to mention really quick was I remember reading a study a few years ago about violence towards politicians, and I don't know if you guys saw this. The top politician in Britain who got the most abuse and threats was Nigel Farage, and Diane Abbott was somewhere near the bottom. But if you followed the mainstream media about threats and insults towards politicians, you would think that Diane Abbott was right at the top, wouldn't you? But it just gets swept under the rug because Farage handles it so well. And if something bad did happen to him because of this and the media stirring up this hatred, he wouldn't be treated like Joe Cox or Stephen Lawrence. He'd just be, I don't even think he'd hardly get a response at all. It's sad, really, and it's rather worrying as well.
To kind of come in and what you'd said kind of towards the start, Laura. I think the way the way it works now is if you are not of the accepted trajectory of politics, you are either far right or alt right. There is this tiny little window of acceptable views and movements, and if you're not in that, you're considered far right, and that's how they justify Carl Benjamin being considered, a right wing crazy person. Now, one thing I heard him say recently was, if you replace the word alt right with working class, a lot of their arguments then make sense. And I think there's an element of truth to that, as you find a lot of working class, especially working class English people will lean to the right, or lean right in the sense of wanting to preserve England as they know it. They probably, in days gone past, a lot of these people would have voted Labour, but I might be wrong on that. But it's interesting how it seems to be now the people who care most about this country are the ones who go out and do an honest graft day in, day out. They're the ones who care most about their country, and they're the ones who are being demonised, as being considered far right and hating people who come into this country for whatever reason. They're the ones to be demonized when they're the ones that are the workforce of this country.
Yeah, it's kind of I think I remember a speech by Nick Griffin in the European Parliament where he referred to, kind of ironically, to the final solution to the white Christian European problem. And it does seem like that the powers that be, because of course they're aware of what's going on here, but they certainly see the white working class, the ones that have awoken from the Labour Party tribalism in this country and are looking for more right-wing solutions, are the problem that needs dealing with. And I remember a YouTuber who I like a lot sort of referred to Tommy Robinson as a proxy. So you have to imagine that what they do to Tommy Robinson is what they will do or want to do to the white working class who are socially conservative. And I think that's probably a fair analogy.
Yeah, he is definitely the kind of canary in the coal mine kind of thing. And, it's amazing how the media and the left have managed to demonise, St George's Cross. I'm Scottish. I'm not really too bothered about the whole Scotland-England divide, but clearly patriotic English people will stand by the English flag, and especially during the World Cup, etc. There is a genuine attempt to try and demonise the English flag, and this kind of links back to the whole trying to break down a country, you destroy its roots, and there is an attack on the very fundamental things which make British, English, Scottish people, what they identify with. These fundamental things are being attacked by more than one group of people.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And it does seem to me that the fact that there is, rarely any action when things happen to people like Tommy and even Carl Benjamin to a point, as much as I don't really like him, it does seem that there is a tacit complicity of the state, because I get the strong impression that Antifa, for instance, are, and the other anti-fascist types are kind of a proxy for the state. They act as the state's foot soldiers without really knowing that they're doing it, probably, against the white working class, against the symbolism of a country, against the history of a country. And they are doing, in the eyes of the cabal, they're doing God's work. So, yeah, I mean, it's a worrying trajectory what's going on, and we just got to hope that the authorities will actually step in and try and put a stop to it.
Well, I think there's kind of the beginnings of kind of the truth being forced to show itself. I think Jess Phillips, obviously, Carl Benjamin's arch nemesis, I think she had confronted people down south about the whole LGBT curriculum being banned in certain English schools, and she was trying to argue with people about that, and she was being shut down by I believe it was a Muslim male, and there is obviously the evidence that the people who the left have allied themselves with, whether rightly or wrongly, just as looking at it from an outside point of view, there are clearly groups of people who the left have brought under their umbrella who appear not to be compatible when you look at their values.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see how that particular one plays out. I saw the video of Jess Phillips arguing with that Muslim man. I think it was in Birmingham. I mean, there's going to be maybe a chasm between certain factions of the left, because they, at some point, now that the reality is becoming evident to them that some of their imports don't abide by their values of tolerance and liberal democracy, it'll be interesting to see what side they come down on, because at the moment it's pretty hilarious watching them run around like headless chickens trying to decide, what the moral position is. I mean, to be fair to Jess Phillips, she's kind of standing by her, we have a tolerant society, and she did argue with that Muslim man. But I've got to say, personally, I don't agree with teaching anal sex to 4-year-olds either. So I'm probably on the side of the Muslim man in this argument. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. But just to bring you in again, Laura, this is kind of a tongue-in-cheek comment, but it is also kind of potentially worrying that if it's deemed acceptable to throw milkshakes and assault, advocate throwing bricks at people like classic liberal and other liberal, Sargon and Tommy, I wonder what they'd like to do to us, or what they would see acceptable to do to us.
I honestly don't think that they differentiate between people on the centre right and people on the far right. I think they just see us as one big fascist bubble. And obviously we've seen the tweets of people saying that it should be bricks and it should be acid instead of milkshakes. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of these are LARPers, to be honest, and they're just showing off to their friends online. But there will be some of them out there who are dangerous, who are genuinely dangerous. And I don't think they would differentiate between just someone on the centre right who's sick of mass uncontrolled immigration and somebody who actually wants an ethno state. I don't think they'd up the violence. I think we're all just under this umbrella of fascist.
Yeah, the whole NPC thing is working on overtime in their minds, where people who do not fit their idealistic thoughts, whether it's being completely tolerant to all people, if you don't fit into this tiny little bubble, you are as good as Hitler. There is no exception. It's almost kind of like it is kind of a black and white. You either are this or you are everything that we see to be bad.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are probably right. They probably don't differentiate, which is kind of it doesn't say much for their intelligence, to be honest. But because people like myself and Carl Benjamin are so far apart that I have probably more in common with communists than I do with with Carl Benjamin. So, I mean, maybe it's lucky for us, but the left really should perhaps differentiate a little more than they do. Just want to say before we move on or anything that thanks to Heinrich Honkler, who's donated €5 to us. That's much appreciated. Thank you very much. And as always, for any future donations, we are very grateful. Before we wrap up, I just want to know, Laura, Darth, you got anything you want to add on these topics or anything else we've spoken about?
Ladies first.
I'm not sure if you guys mentioned it. I had to mute my screen for a little while, but did you talk about how these people are supposed to be on the left and they're supposed to represent the working class? And then there's even ones who are lapping as communists, but they're supporting the global financial elite and these huge corporations just because these huge corporations like Burger King are saying it's okay to punch fascists. It's just so hypocritical, isn't it? I'm not sure if you guys mentioned it, but did you pick up on that?
Not really, but you're right, and I think this kind of links back to what William was saying earlier on. Is you've had these left-leaning, social justice warriors, for want of a better phrase, have infiltrated these big companies and organisations. Now, obviously, there's companies like Google, like Facebook, who are very left-leaning to begin with. But when you have big companies who have either voluntarily adopted left-leaning principles or who have been, beaten into submission, forced to accept these principles, whether they like it or not, the left are going to side with these people because they adopt their policies and their beliefs. But like you're saying, the working class person has been left behind, and the once Labour voters are kind of left without a political home, and are of course then going to go find a home elsewhere. And what I was going to kind of say after you is, I think you've got, as William says, you've got a lot of different groups of people are being forced to kind of ally together against this insanity on the left. And if the left would stop being so crazy about their points of view, you'd probably find there is, a kind of lot more broad spectrum of views. But right now it's basically, you've got the left, the woke left point of view, and everybody else. And that's kind of how it's stacking up right now.
Yeah, I mean, I do find it particularly amusing that leftists are so quick to jump into bed with giant corporations as soon as they happen to advocate their views. Somebody, Blackwater Park again, has got some hot takes in the chat, to be fair, but mentioned Antifa is on the same side as Goldman Sachs. And it reminds me of a tweet I saw once that pointed out that when the leftists who can claim to be speaking truth to power or whatever they say, they put out their diversity as a strength mantra and all the NPC stuff. They literally sound like a Goldman Sachs corporate initiative, and it's impossible to differentiate between that and a leftist talking point, which is just, clown world. Welcome to it, everybody. It's crazy. Sorry, Darth, you wanted to.
Sorry, I was just, as you were saying that, I was just thinking, I think the corporations that they're allying themselves with, I think the left right now are very intellectually lazy. And, they obviously want more government because the government will do more of the things that they want, therefore they have to do less work. And I think as long as these companies are doing things which they want done, they will be happy to allow these companies to kind of assert their dominance, i.e., shutting down the narrative on Facebook, etc. They're happy to let that happen as long as it's working on their side. If the narrative were to flip and they were all of a sudden favouring the other side, I guarantee you they'd be shouting for the breakup of every single large multinational company.
Yeah, perhaps. The narrative probably won't shift for a while because these companies are staffed with SJWs, but that might be a good ploy for nationalists. Maybe we should all, or we should encourage people to start getting jobs at Facebook and in the PR departments of multinationals, because then maybe there's a possibility of shifting the narrative in our favour. Just a thought, probably quite ambitious, but nevertheless, we're a movement in need of ideas at the moment. Right, so I think we've covered those topics nicely. So we're going to wrap up right about now. Before we do, I just want to say once again, if anybody wants to help us out, then there's links in the description below to do so. Also, please remember to hit like and subscribe. It really helps us. And I guess all that's left to say is thanks for listening, and thank you for joining me tonight, Darth and Laura.
Guys, losing minds. See you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers, everybody.